Good evening. In this broadcast, the information program, The News. Today's edition, we begin with a report about the meeting which took place in the Kremlin between the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, and the Chairman of the government, Viktor Chernomyrdin. They discussed issues of the social-economic situation in the country, including payments for salary debts, the draft budget for the coming year, and also several personnel changes in the Cabinet of Ministers. It was also announced that by the decree of the President, Vladimir Polivanov, is appointed Chairman of the State Property Commission. Previously, he had headed the administration of the Amur district. Vladimir Babichev has been appointed head of the apparatus of government. Prior to this appointment, he was the Deputy General Director of the company Gazmash, which is a part of Gazprom. He handled administrative and legal issues. With more appointments to higher government posts, today's voting to confirm the constitutional judges in the Federative Council was suspended in a particular way. And today could have either become or not become the birthday of the Russian Constitutional Court. For this, it was sufficient to fill the three remaining vacancies. On the recommendation of Boris Yeltsin, Sergei Filatov submitted 5 candidacies. 2 of them, Mikhail Krasnov and Valery Sarilsky, previously had already not been confirmed because of a shortage of deputy votes, which again happened today. And the famous lawyer, Yuri Kolmakov, today did not pass the ratings vote, just as is Raif Biktagirov from Tatarstan. But according to the procedure, tomorrow on the candidacies of Kolmakov and Biktagirov, a repeat vote will be held. This Tuesday ended successfully only for Yuri Danilov. Today he was appointed as a Justice of the Constitutional Court. 25 documents of state importance previously adopted by the lower chamber must be ratified during the course of the 12th session of the Federative Council. This work, of course, is routine, but legislators cannot do without it, incidentally, just as they cannot do without quickly reacting to problems arising in the country. By the suggestion of the head of the administration of the Arkhangelsk district, Pavel Volashkin, where, as we've already reported, a catastrophic situation has developed because of the shortage of fuel, it was decided to discuss the condition of the northern regions at the Federative Council session. Pervasively, the entire north today is freezing over. In addition, there's an enormous shortage of food and industrial goods. Very large companies are closing down. Some people had wanted to live on these reserves for centuries, but that doesn't happen in life. Therefore, a colossal, enormous tin pewter mining industry is simply melting before our eyes in the north. If the federal government doesn't finally understand and respond, then of course this bad situation will become even worse in the face of the idleness of the government of the Russian Federation. Alarming letters and telegrams, the entire meaning of which distills to the only words, "We're freezing over," are heard in Kuzbas with the onslaught of winter more frequently, and the miners are prepared to respond to any danger signal. However, the economy of the Kuznetsk Basin itself is chilled by non-payments. Despite the decline in productivity, fuel at existing coal stockpiles is in sufficient quantities, but now there is a chronic lack of coal piles. What will the Russian coal workers do in the winter? There is a proposal on this matter to entrench the running of a coal association under concrete regions. Purchasers and vendors of coal will be able not only to pay on time for it, but to maintain and preserve stock levels. Something must be done so that not only winter and extreme circumstances should dictate the economy and push it off its market course. There should be strict accounting and order in all aspects. Regarding the telegrams from freezing territories, especially Sakhalin, Khabarovsk, Krim, and Primoria, the miners of Kuzbas will not abandon their native folk in trouble. The problem of the fuel energy sector of the Primoria region was discussed also today at the Kremlin meeting between the President Boris Yeltsin with a group of heads of the administrations of Rims and districts of the Far East. The complicated situation was analyzed in the economy and the infrastructure of the region, significantly aggravated this year by natural disasters. Among other problems singled out were the format restructuring of the fuel energy sector, foreign economic activity, issues of the region preparing for winter, and also the state of affairs overall in the social economic sector of the Far Eastern region. From the Arkhangelsk district, news was received that work has stopped at the industrial plants of Arkhangelsk, Severodvinsk and Plesetsk. The main reason for this is the shortage of electrical power. The situation is assessed as critical. Extremely in short supply is black oil for heating electrical stations. For now, no response has ensued to the appeal of the leadership of the Arkhangelsk, Murmansk districts and Karelia to the President and government of Russia. Last night at 0 hours 15 minutes, the first energy block was shut down, the Ignalinsk nuclear power station. As was reported at the Ignalinsk nuclear station, terrorist threats were made by a certain resident, Kitotosh Majuika, who demanded from the government of Sweden $8 million American, and Georgi Dikaidze, who was sentenced by the Lithuanian Supreme Court to death. Boris Dikaidze, the organizer of the murder of a journalist here. To study the condition of the Ignalinsk power station, a Swedish specialist group arrived, and also an elite police group, a group of Special Designation Unit employees experienced in analyzing similar cases of blackmail. Although the technical physical protection of the nuclear station is designed in such a way as to prevent possible terror acts, additional measures are being undertaken to prevent any possibility of diversion. We'll add to that the Ignalinsk nuclear power station supplies almost 90% of all the electrical power in the Republic. After its shutdown by the administrative decision, Lithuania was connected to the electrical systems of Russia and Belarus. The miners of Vorkuta, at a meeting organized by the independent professional unions, demanded the resignation of government and early presidential elections. They're demanding liquidation of salary debts. The Parliament of Ukraine today consented to file criminal charges against the former Prime Minister of the Republic, the National Deputy, Yefim Zvigilsky. He is accused of causing damage to the economy of Ukraine in the amount of $25 million. According to certain reports, he was involved in currency operations jointly with the commercial bank Damian. Today until noon, Belarus was in a state similar to paralysis. Freezing rain fully stopped public transportation, causing a large number of working sites to be empty. The weather surprise reminded us that everything is close to winter, and the prices the 1st of November returned to previous levels by the presidential decree kindled hope among the population that the new salaries will be sufficient for life. The contradictions which arose between the rate of free price setting and today's freezing of prices will disappear, as the Cabinet of Ministers assures, after the development of a mechanism of social protection for citizens. For now, old prices on almost 100 brands of milk and bread goods, and also additional compensation for the needy, will take 100 billion Belarusian rubles from the budget. But adopting an economic decision, Alexander Lukashenko was guided by political interests. I need to preserve that support which the people showed me at the elections. I need nothing else, and with these people, I'm confident we'll make this republic a republic. The Moscow Commercial Charo Bank, despite promises, didn't open today for transactions with its depositors, blaming the fact that its accounts are in essence arrested by the central bank. According to the central bank, the overall sum of the Charo Bank by 8 to 9 times exceeds the volume of means which figure in the complaints of its clients. The directorship of the Charo Bank issued an official statement and says that the bank is not officially bankrupt and is capable of fulfilling its obligations. The bank is prepared to set up an observation committee which will include representatives of the public and largest organizations of depositors. Charo Bank is prepared to resume its operations as early as tomorrow. News of financial affairs which shock the economy of our country have become constant rubrics in daily newspapers and economic weeklies. Will domestic financiers of dubious reputation manage with their projects to emerge on the civilized securities market in the West, particularly in London? Alexander Malikov reports from the British capital. The promise of Mr. Mavrodi to achieve success in the homeland of Adam Smith was received in England as curious, but this curious promise yet generated concern. It's understandable because in England people are sufficiently informed of the so-called success of the 3 M's at home. And at home it's understandable, there the walls help. But what if the fresh certificates of MMM appear suddenly on the London's fund market? But authorities, although uncomfortable at such a notion, but the Institute of the Administration of Trade Standards admits that they can do little with Mavrodi types if the latter descend on the British Isles. The current laws of the United Kingdom could be powerless before the advancing MMM pyramid. And truly, capital knows no boundaries, but fortunately, not everywhere are borders of common sense absent. The British Department of Industry and Trade this year has caught 3 companies red-handed attempting to pull a scheme a la MMM, when each subsequent share purchaser was paid by money of a former holder. So in England, England, such opportunists of gain are nothing new. A member of Parliament from the Liberal Party, Elliot Moreland, represents a series of electoral districts who've had a sad experience similar to the MMM shareholders. If you soberly look at what happened in Russia, he said in an interview to our program, you'll find confirmation that any financial scheme not substantiated by property or manufacturing or investments invariably is doomed to collapse. MMM, which had set its sight for England, wants to take along from Russia with it the old method of deception, to rob Paul in order to pay Peter. Today's briefing at the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs was dedicated to the housing problem, its criminal aspect. They discussed crimes connected with the privatization of housing. As the malicious statistics indicate, the most susceptible to such crimes were many major cities of Russia, and mostly Moscow. On a constant increases the number of citizens who, after completing a purchase or sale transaction of housing, vanish without a trace. This year, already 253 related cases have been under investigation. 80 criminal cases have been launched, and 23 bodies were found of former residence owners by employees of the Criminal Investigations Department. The tempos of entering the market have defined the measure of protecting the vulnerable, weak, or people at an economic disadvantage. Drafts of corresponding laws should have undergone preliminary criminological expertise to decrease the number of loopholes for the criminal element. Boris Yeltsin met today with a group of the leading lawyers of the country. The president discussed with law experts the question of the feasibility to create a council on judicial reform within the administration of the head of state. Boris Yeltsin noted that he attentively listens to the opinion and recommendations of lawyers. Today, two Duma committees on issues of local self-rule and information policy conducted a joint parliamentary hearing session combining the problem of reform of local self-rule with the role of mass media in illuminating it. Participants of the hearing turned to sources of mass media with a request to help regions in building their own rules, since now the system of self-rule has no foundation. The adoption of the necessary laws is delayed, and in some regions, elections have not yet been held for heads and organs of self-rule. Sources of mass media should more frequently inform, analyze, and clarify problems for people. In general, the press is the only instrument of control over the government's operations. Today, the Duma Committee on CIS Affairs held a parliamentary hearings on Russian-Ukrainian relations. Special attention was devoted by the parliamentarians, diplomats, and military who gathered to the preparation of a political agreement on the payment of the Ukrainian debt to Russia and the questions of the Black Sea Fleet in Crimea. Those who spoke were unanimous in one thing: the condition of relations between Russia and Ukraine as historical partners is unnatural. It was emphasized that lately dialogue has become more lively. There is a certain base of agreement founded on international law. On a delegation level, according to the Russian ambassador Yuri Dubinin, in October it was possible to agree on all contentious issues and articles of the political agreement. However, to the proposals of diplomats, as Yuri Dubinin noted, official Kiev has not yet responded. According to the assessment of the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Krylov, the text of the political agreement has been worked out. However, to date there is no breakthrough in resolving the problems of the Black Sea Fleet, payment of the 5 trillion Ukrainian debt to Russia, and Crimea. The deputy of Ukrainian Parliament, Yuri Boldarev, noted that in this situation both Ukraine and Russia are partly to blame, and he feels that they should move in small steps. First, Ukraine should enter the Interparliamentary Assembly and the common CIS market, and later move toward a military political union. With the problem of the Black Sea Fleet, it's advisable not to rush at all. The deputy of the Federative Council of Russia, Nikolai Gonchar, feels that the division of the fleet will augment tension in the region. I would propose to think about creating a unified Russian-Ukrainian fleet on the Black Sea, which, in the framework of strategic cooperation, and this proposal was already sounded by the President of Ukraine, to defend the common strategic interest. Regarding Crimea, it, according to certain assessments, remains the most severe problem, although Russia has recognized Crimea to be an integral part of Ukraine. There are apprehensions that the Supreme Soviet of Ukraine can dismiss the Supreme Soviet of Crimea. That would be because the Supreme Soviet of Crimea did not fulfill the demands submitted to it. Crimea will never agree with such a type of a decision. Whether this is good or bad, I'm not speaking about that. I'm speaking of the reality. And the reality is such that Crimeans in their overwhelming majority, do not want to separate from Russia. Dual citizenship could resolve certain problems, but this question evokes, among some of the Ukrainian leaders and parliamentarians, for some reason, such a reaction that this is a type of aggression on the independence of Ukraine. Helmut Kohl has again been re-elected to the post of Federal Chancellor of Germany for another 4 years. In the Bundestag, upon voting, he received 338 votes. That is, only one vote more than what was needed. The new government of the Federal Chancellor will have 16 ministers, and the partners in the coalition, the Free Democrats, will receive 3 portfolios, and Klaus Kinkel will remain in his post as Minister of Foreign Affairs. Today in Belgrade, the special representative of the Russian President Alexander Zotov arrived. He met with the President of Serbia, Slobodan Milosevic. The main topic of discussion was the situation in the region after the refusal by the American administration to participate in supporting the embargo on weapons to Bosnian Muslims. Serious concern over the latest events in former Yugoslavia were expressed in the Dutch city Noordwijk by participants of the regular session of the Western European Union Council. I'll remind you, first of all, that the Western European Union is a defense organization which is seen as the European support of NATO. However, disagreements between the Europeans and the Americans regarding Bosnia, especially in the last few days when the United States unilaterally refused to observe the ban on weapons deliveries to the Bosnian Muslims, placed the unity of NATO under a serious threat. Moreover, many observers feel that the North Atlantic Union may be on the verge of a split, because the situation in Bosnia and the latest steps of the Clinton administration introduced changes into the agenda of the session, pushing the Bosnian problem into a central position. The heads of foreign, political and medical departments of the Union noted severe deterioration in the situation in parts of Sarajevo, Bihać and Mostar, and therefore at the session harsh criticism was heard of the warring sides in light of the attacks on the so-called security zone created by a decision of the United Nations and are under the protection of the peacekeeping forces of the international community. And that is why, in the summary document, it is noted that the revoking of the weapons embargo on Bosnia will precipitate further escalation of the conflict and create an enormous risk for the peaceful population and also for personnel of international organizations located in combat activity regions. It's noteworthy that participants of the session decided to continue control over compliance with the embargo in the Adriatic Sea with their own forces without dispatching additional ships to replace the departed American ships. And finally, the seriousness of the problem is reflected by the fact that today in Brussels, the NATO Council intends to specially examine the question about sanctions against the Bosnian Muslims. In Bosnia, combat activities continue on many fronts. Near Bihać, inter-Muslim clashes have resumed between the government forces and autonomous regiments, and the army of the Bosnian Serbs has retrieved all the territories in western Bosnia lost during the recent aggression of Muslims. Today, in the center of Belgrade, near the Turkish embassy, a vehicle was blown up. One person was injured. An investigation is underway. Today, on Russia's proposal, the UN Security Council intends to issue a statement in which a political assessment will be given to the official recognition by Iraq of the sovereignty and borders of Kuwait. As is known, yesterday, the American representative to the UN, Madeleine Albright, stated that the Security Council had discussed the question of the regime of sanctions against Iraq. Today in Jakarta, with the adoption of a joint declaration, the Conference of Leaders of the Asian-Pacific region countries ended. In 25 years, here a zone of free trade will be fully created, which will unite 7 of the 10 largest economic systems of the world. So it happened that the high-level meetings are being held not in the capital, but beyond its limits. The current meeting was held in the country residence of the President of Indonesia in Bogor. Here, the leaders of leading nations convened today, the Asian countries and several developing countries. Leaders of the countries, who are members of the Asian-Pacific Cooperation Organization, intend in the beginning of the century to complete liberalization of trade and investment in the most broad region of the world, which is the location of 50% of the world industrial manufacturing. The goal is extremely complicated because the members of the forum include countries with various levels of economic development. On the eve, at the meeting of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Trade, it was possible to agree on a common approach in resolving arising problems. In the declaration adopted here in Bakur, there is stated the striving to broaden trade in the Asian-Pacific region on the basis of partnership and mutual respect. Andrei Kozyrev has arrived in Paris. During his talks in the capital of France, he will discuss questions of the two-sided ties between Russia and the European Union, and from January the 1st, France will chair this organization, and special attention during Kozyrev's Paris visit will be afforded to the Bosnian crisis and problems of European security. Saint-Geneviève-des-Bois, a Russian necropolis near Paris, here on the French soil, far from native expanses. Thousands and tens of thousands found their eternal rest. Those who will always remain our compatriots, exiled from their homeland by the revolutionary storm, forced to leave it in subsequent years. There are many among them who were prominent activists of domestic and world culture. Their names on tomb plaques are the pride of Russia: Ivan Bunin, Viktor Nekrasov, Konstantin Korovin, Sergei Lafarge, Alexander Ganich, Andrei Tarkovsky. In 1986, finding his final refuge at the Saint-Geneviève cemetery was the prominent master of domestic and world cinema. The tombstone on his grave was triumphantly unveiled here today. The life and work of the world-famous cinematographer inspired the idea of the monument. This is a sacrifice. The design of the sculpture was developed by the wife of the director and represents the biblical Calvary carved out of granite, crowned by a Byzantine cross with 7 steps symbolizing his ascent in the cinematography world. Only 9 months were needed for the Moscow Fund of Tchaikovsky to execute this monument, created on the funds of 2 young Russian businessmen, for which they are thanked greatly. In the greeting of the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, read at the ceremony by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andrei Kozyrev, who arrived in France on an official visit, it was emphasized that the creative work of Andrei Tarkovsky, a great artist of the 20th century, will yet have to be appreciated by us fully, and Russia will preserve a grateful memory of him. 60 years ago, on the 15th of November 1934, broadcasted from Moscow was the first regular program of the short shrift television. It occurred here in the small studio on Shablovka Street, from which, incidentally, still programs are broadcasted, but now from Russian television. The first broadcast was half an hour in length, and it was a stage concert. So began that which became an inexorable part of the life of any of us. What do you mean to live without television? It's unrealistic. It's almost impossible without television. It would be boring without television. Now, television is an entire empire, embracing 93 television and radio companies whose productions are watched daily by 8 out of 10 Russians. Through satellite communications, television broadcasts reach the entire world. The sale of the first individual television sets began before the war. Broadcasting became daily in 1955. In 1968, for the first time, the program which you are watching began to be broadcasted. And since then, many divide their evening into pre- and post-evening news from Ostankino time. Without television, one can't imagine contemporary society. In America, an experiment was conducted. Volunteers were paid so that they would not watch television. The most stoic lasted only 3 months. And in Brazil, as it turned out, television is watched not only by Brazilians. Evgeny Fatia from Rio de Janeiro with a small sensation. In the suburbs of a small Brazilian town, Mucugê, which is not far from the equator in the state of Bahia, flying saucers have become such a frequent occurrence that local citizens even erected this monument. Everyone swears in one voice that they have seen UFOs several times. There is a particularly dense concentration of them over the enormous, ideally round crater with a depth of 100 meters, which here is considered to be a cursed site. And at sunset, mysterious lights chaotically move about the sky. The most successful in filming UFOs was the bank employee Julio de Souza Barbosa. He himself and his unique photos were shown by the Brazilian television company Globo. Literally a few days later, the film buff died of a heart attack during a regular observation of the saucers. Can it be that those who fly those UFOs watch even our earthly television programs? I think that our information program is viewed more here on Earth. As you know already, in Russia this has been done for the last 60 years, and the end of television is not in sight. After the ads, the sports of the day, and the weather report for tomorrow, and tomorrow at 2100 hours Moscow time, again, the information program. All the best. Goodbye. Good evening. The Russian hockey stars, after the tournament, which ended yesterday, received a break for somewhat of a rest, and our clubs have already resumed their battle in the international hockey tournament. In the Western Zone, Itil beat the Northern Steel 6-2, and in the Eastern Zone, the Avangard defeated Siberia also 6-2, and the Ruby lost to the Novokuznetsk from Metallurgist 3-4. In the first round of the most prestigious women's tournament, the Virginia Slims, in the famous New York Madison Square Gardens, the second seed of the world, the Spaniard, Aranka Sanchez, unexpectedly lost in 3 sets to the 24-year-old from France, Julie Allard. Allard, according to herself, played the best match of her life. And likewise in New York, the public continues to be amazed by Martina Navratilova in the pairs competition together with Malone Buligraf. She's already in the second round. In her singles match, in the first match, Navratilova will play Gabriela Sabatini. And again about tennis, in Frankfurt at the World Championship of the 8 top tennis professionals, the first matches have been held. The Spaniard, Sergio Bruguera, in 2 sets beat Michael Chang, and Boris Baker in 3 sets defeated Goran Ivanisevic. The world chess champion, Anatoly Karpov, playing the black figures in the 59th move in the 5th match, beat the French chess master Thierry Lothier and became an early winner in their friendly match in the Spanish town Ubeda. The score was 3.5 to 1.5 points, but by regulations, the rivals will play one more game. Good evening. Warm, humid air from the Baltic Sea will spread through the central regions tomorrow. This will be contributed to by the cyclone over Finland. In the Kaliningrad district in Belarus, the Baltic countries in the northwest region, and the Leningrad district, tomorrow it will be cloudy with precipitation and strong winds. Temperatures during the night and day from 0 to +5, in places as high as +10. In Karelia, Murmansk and Arkhangelsk areas also will be under the influence of a cyclone over Finland. Here, Wednesday will be cloudy, snow with isolated snowstorms, gusty winds, temperatures from -4 to +1 degrees. The central area will be in a zone of atmospheric fronts, therefore here it will be cloudy with snow and rain and isolated snowstorms and strong gusty winds. The roads will be icy, temperatures at night from 0 to -5 during the day, -2 to +3 degrees. Under the influence of those same fronts will be the central area, the central Chernozem area, and the majority of Ukraine and Moldava. Here, prevalently, it will be cloudy with rain and wet snow, some drizzle and gusty winds, temperatures at night around 0. During the day from -1 to +4. In the south of Ukraine and Moldava, +5 to +10 degrees. In Stavropol and Krasnaya Rims in the republics of the Northern Caucasus, it will be cloudy with rain, in the mountains with snow, isolated freezing drizzle, at night 0 -5, during the day 0 +5. On the Black Sea coast of the Krasnodar Rim, cloudy with isolated rains during the day, +5 to 10 degrees. Beyond the Caucasus, partly cloudy skies, rain in the mountains with snow, temperatures from +8 to 13 degrees. In St. Petersburg, Wednesday, cloudy with wet snow, temperatures at night around 0, during the day +2 to 4 degrees. In Moscow and suburbs, tomorrow, inclement weather with wet snow, strong gusty winds, temperatures at night -1 to 3, during the day 0 +2. The roads will be icy. Please be attentive and careful. This was information from the Oceanic Meteorological Center. The Russian Food Bank hopes that your morning will be pleasant. Goodbye.